At Thanksgiving morning, I froze when I heard my son's voice drifting from the hallway. "Mom will babysit all 20 kids for free," Daniel whispered, his tone casual, almost smug. Then Tiffany laughed a high, sharp sound. "A free nanny and a full buffet. Best deal ever. She has nothing better to do." My fingers went numb. The rolling pin slipped from my hand and clattered onto the floor. My chest squeezed as if someone had slammed a fist into me. My own family on a day meant for gratitude was plotting to turn me into unpaid help. My ears rang. Shame rushed up my throat, but their voices carried on each word another blade. "She'll handle the chaos," Daniel said. "That's her role," Tiffany added. "She'll smile, act grateful, and no one will notice. Everyone will just think she's happy." Role. Not mother, not grandmother, just a role. My stomach churned, bile rising as humiliation and anger twisted together. For 62 years, I had cooked, cleaned, carried this family through every holiday, every crisis. I told myself it was love, but in that instant, I saw the truth to them. It wasn't love. It was convenience. My knees trembled. The oven timer shrieked, startling me so badly I nearly fell. I slammed it off with shaking hands, tears burning behind my eyes. She has nothing better to do. My son's words echoed until they hollowed me out. But then, beneath the shame, something else stirred. Steel. They thought I would bow my head, keep serving, keep smiling. They had no idea. I straightened flour clinging to my palms, betrayal burning through me like fire. They wanted me to babysit 20 kids for free at Thanksgiving. But this year, I would change everything. My name is Margaret Lewis. I am 62 years old, a retired elementary school teacher from Dayton, Ohio, and a widow of 12 years. Most people in town know me for my pies at the church bake sales or the way I never missed a school play when I was still teaching. My husband, Frank, used to call me the glue that held everything together. After he passed from a sudden heart attack, I carried that glue role into my family. I cooked for every holiday, babysat every weekend, paid for little extras when my son Daniel or my daughter Claire came up short. I told myself it was my duty, my joy. The truth is, I was terrified of being left behind. I grew up in a generation where mothers were measured by sacrifice, where love meant pouring yourself out until your cup ran dry. And for decades, I lived like that. When Daniel married Tiffany, I thought my world would expand. Instead, I found myself working harder, more casseroles, more errands, more last-minute babysitting. Tiffany smiled with perfect teeth and perfect nails while I washed dishes late at night. Still, I kept giving. My neighbors praised me. "Margaret, you're such a saint." I believed them. But saints get tired. I remember last Christmas how I stayed up until 3 a.m., basting a turkey only to watch my family eat and then drift into the living room without a word of thanks. I remember the July reunion, how I missed my book club because Daniel asked me to watch just for a few hours while he ran errands, and those hours stretched into the whole day. Each memory was a little cut, and I carried hundreds of them beneath my skin. This Thanksgiving was supposed to be my chance to prove once again that I was indispensable. I had been planning for weeks, pumpkin pies cooling on the sill, cranberries simmering on the stove, 2 turkeys thawing in the garage fridge. I had lists taped to the cabinet doors, who sat where which child had allergies when, to set the timer for rolls. That kitchen was my battlefield, and I thought if I fought hard enough I could win love. And then, this morning, I heard the truth spill from Daniel's lips. He didn't see me as love. He saw me as labor. Tiffany didn't see me as family. She saw me as staff. I stood there trembling over the counter, and every sacrifice of the past decade rearranged itself in my mind. Instead of proof of devotion, it looked like evidence of exploitation. It was in that moment that something inside me shifted. My identity was not just mom, not just grandma, not just the woman who could juggle 20 children while stuffing turkeys and scrubbing pots. My name is Margaret Lewis, and I have a life beyond their convenience. The thought shocked me. It was almost frightening, like standing on the edge of a cliff, but it was also electric. I wiped the flour from my hands and whispered to myself, "No more." My heart was still hammering, but a clarity cut through the noise. This Thanksgiving would not end the way they had scripted it. For the first time in years, I would write my own part. When I was a child, Thanksgiving at my parents' house looked different. My mother believed in abundance pies lined up like soldiers on the counter. Cousins sprawled across the floor, the smell of sage and turkey skin filling every corner. But she also believed in hierarchy. Women worked, men sat. Daughters were invisible, sons were golden. I was the one scrubbing pans while my brothers tossed football in the yard. That was the script handed to me. Maybe that's why when I grew up, I never questioned stepping into the same invisible role. It was what I had been trained for. When I married Frank, I thought I had finally escaped that cycle. He wasn't perfect, no man is, but he saw me. He asked about my day, read my early lesson plans, helped with laundry. When the kids came along, he didn't vanish into the armchair like my father. He bathed them, read stories, taught Daniel to fish. But after he died so suddenly, just 51 gone in a blink, it was as if the universe shoved me back into that script. Without Frank to defend my boundaries, I poured myself into being everything for everyone. It began small. Claire called from college, Mom. I can't pay for my books. I wired her the money and skipped my own dental appointment. Daniel asked if I could babysit so he and Tiffany could have a date night. I agreed, missing choir practice. Each favor blurred into obligation. And because I never said no, the requests grew bolder. By the time the grandkids came, I was the default babysitter, caterer, decorator, problem solver. The first betrayal I remember clearly was Daniel's wedding. Tiffany's parents were supposed to cover catering, but somehow it fell through 2 weeks before the event. Suddenly, I was at Costco buying bulk pasta cooking for 80 guests, staying up past midnight while my hands ached. On the wedding day, people complimented the food. Tiffany smiled graciously, accepting the praise. No one mentioned my name. I was so tired that night I fell asleep at the kitchen table, mascara streaked on my cheeks. Then there was Claire's baby shower. She wanted a Pinterest-perfect spread balloons, cupcakes, charcuterie boards. I drained my savings account to buy decorations even though she had a good job by then. When she unwrapped gifts, she laughed and said Mom really went overboard again. Everyone clapped. But later, when I asked if she had liked the antique cradle I refinished, she shrugged. It's a bit old-fashioned. My hands, raw from sanding and staining, curled into fists under the tablecloth. The moments piled up. One Easter, Daniel left his kids with me for just 2 hours and didn't return until after midnight. My back screamed from chasing toddlers, but when I mentioned it the next day, he chuckled. You're the best, Mom. We couldn't do this without you. He said it like a compliment, but it sounded like a sentence. And Tiffany, oh, Tiffany knew how to play sweet in public. At church gatherings, she'd gush about my pies. But behind closed doors, she treated me like hired help. Once, when I declined to watch the kids because I had a doctor's appointment, she pursed her lips. It must be nice to put yourself first for once. The sarcasm cut deeper than any knife. I canceled the appointment. Looking back, I see the pattern clear as glass. Every sacrifice became an expectation. Every yes erased my right to ever say no, and the more I gave, the smaller I became in their eyes. The deepest cut came last year at Christmas. I had worked for days, 2 turkeys, 3 pies, endless trays of cookies. By the time dinner was served, my feet throbbed, my back ached, but I smiled as everyone filled their plates. Afterward, Daniel and Tiffany drifted to the living room with the others, leaving me alone at the sink with a mountain of dishes. I stood there, sleeves rolled up, tears stinging my eyes, listening to the sound of laughter from the next room. My own children didn't even notice I was gone. That night, as I scrubbed the last pan, I whispered to the empty kitchen, "I'm so tired." But the next morning, I was back at the stove making pancakes for the grandkids. And now, this Thanksgiving, the truth had been spoken aloud. They hadn't even tried to hide it. To Daniel and Tiffany, my labor wasn't just assumed, it was planned, scheduled, packaged as a deal. I wasn't family anymore. I was staff. As I stood in my kitchen, shaking, memories swarmed me like stinging bees. The missed doctor appointments, the empty bank account after buying party supplies, the holidays I spent in the kitchen while everyone else enjoyed the warmth of the living room. Each betrayal landed on my chest until I could hardly breathe. But instead of collapsing, I straightened. Maybe it was Frank's voice in my head reminding me that I had value beyond casseroles and babysitting. Maybe it was the ghost of my mother showing me what happens when you never fight back. Or maybe it was just the truth finally breaking free. I was done being invisible. This Thanksgiving would not be another scar on my heart. It would be the turning point. I stood there in my kitchen, the voices of Daniel and Tiffany still buzzing in my ears like wasps. She has nothing better to do. That line played over and over, cutting deeper each time. I wiped my palms on my apron, but the flour stuck stubbornly, a reminder of all the years I had poured myself into dough, into roasts, into casseroles, into a family that saw me as labor, not love. For a moment, I nearly caved. My old instinct whispered, "Stay quiet, serve. It's easier than rocking the boat." That was the voice of habit, the echo of my mother scrubbing pans while the men laughed in the yard. But another voice, newer, sharper, rose above it. "No more." I looked around my kitchen. The pies cooling on the sill, the cranberries bubbling gently on the stove, the turkeys thawing in the garage fridge. Weeks of preparation all lined up like evidence of my devotion. Evidence they had counted on. The realization hit me like a lightning strike. All of it belonged to me, not them. They hadn't lifted a finger. And if I chose to walk away, the whole feast would crumble. The thought terrified me and thrilled me. I pulled out a chair and sat down, my hands trembling. "Margaret," I whispered to myself, "you have two choices. Keep serving until you break, or stop right now." My pulse quickened, the weight of 6 decades pressing down. I thought of Frank. He had always told me, "You don't have to earn love. You just have to be." I had forgotten that truth the moment he died. Now it returned fierce and clear, and I grabbed a notepad from the drawer. If Daniel and Tiffany had written a script for me, I would write a new one. My plan would be simple, silent, devastating. First, the food. I ripped the tape from the cabinet doors, the carefully written lists of seating charts and oven timers, and crumpled them into the trash. Then I walked to the garage, stared at the turkeys sitting heavy in their trays, and made a decision. They wouldn't see a single slice of them. I could donate one to the shelter, freeze the other for myself. Let Daniel figure out how to feed 24 relatives without me. Next, the childcare. Tiffany had bragged that I'd handle the chaos. My lips curled into a bitter smile. Let her chase 20 kids hopped up on sugar and boredom. I wasn't lifting a finger. I would call Loretta my oldest friend, the only one who ever told me I gave too much. We had joked for years about running away to the spa instead of slaving over family dinners. This year, it wouldn't be a joke. I picked up the phone. "Loretta," I said when she answered. "What are you doing today?" She laughed. "Nothing. Why? How would you like to spend Thanksgiving at Greenleaf Spa?" "My treat." There was a pause, then a delighted gasp. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," I replied. My hands steadied as I spoke. "I'm done being the help." After I hung up, I wrote a note on the notepad, short, sharp, final. "I am not your nanny. I am not your caterer. I am your mother. Enjoy your Thanksgiving." I folded it and placed it under the salt shaker where they couldn't miss it. Then I packed. Not clothes, just essentials, my wallet, a book, the scarf Frank once gave me soft as a whisper. As I zipped the bag, a strange lightness filled me. For the first time in years, I wasn't dreading the day ahead. I was shaping it. Before I left, I paused in the doorway of the kitchen. The oven timer blinked, waiting for instructions. I pressed the button and turned it off. The silence rang like a bell. As I stepped outside, the November air cut crisp against my cheeks. Leaves crunched underfoot. For years, I had walked into holiday gatherings carrying trays, toys, diaper bags. Today, I carried nothing but myself. Driving to meet Loretta, I expected guilt to wash over me. Instead, I felt a slow, rising power. Let Daniel and Tiffany scramble. Let them explain to the guests why the tables were bare and the kids unruly. Let them taste the weight of responsibility for once. Because this time the holiday wouldn't break me. It would break the illusion that I existed only for them. And deep inside, I knew once that illusion shattered, there would be no going back. By the time the sun rose higher over Dayton, the decision was sealed. My apron hung on the hook like a surrendered flag, but inside me the opposite was true. I felt like I had just raised a banner for the first time in my life. The phone call to Loretta had been quick, but the echo of her laughter still warmed me. "About time, Margaret," she had said. "About time you lived for yourself." Her voice gave me courage as I set the house into a quiet unraveling. First, the food. I slid the pies, golden and fragrant, into boxes lined with foil. My fingers lingered on the flaky crusts. These pies had been meant for Daniel's table for Tiffany's curated photo spreads, not anymore. I loaded them into the back seat of my car, destined for the women's shelter across town. Let someone who truly needed them taste the sweetness of my work. The turkeys came next, heavy, cold, and stubborn. I wrapped them in freezer paper, stacked them deep into my own chest freezer. They would not grace the carving board in Daniel's dining room. They would keep me fed for weeks instead. It felt like reclaiming a part of my self-nourishment for me, not just for them. Then the decorations. Streamers, napkin holders shaped like little pumpkins, centerpieces I had glued together from pine cones and candles. I swept them into a bag and carried them to the trash bin. The clatter was loud in the morning stillness, but it felt cleansing, like a bell tolling the end of one era and the start of another. The last piece was the note. I pulled it from under the salt shaker. Read it once more. "I am not your nanny. I am not your caterer. I am your mother. Enjoy your Thanksgiving." My hand hovered. Should I soften it? Add a line about love? But then I remembered Tiffany's laughter, Daniel's careless tone. No. The note would stand. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. By 8:30, my car was packed with pies for donation and my overnight bag for the spa. I locked the front door, the click echoing louder than usual, and turned the key with steady hands. For years, I had left that house burdened with casserole dishes and diaper bags. Today, I left light, carrying only freedom. At the shelter, the staff met me with grateful eyes. "We didn't expect pies this morning," one woman said, tears shining. I smiled. Neither did I. Handing them over felt like pulling threads out of the tapestry Daniel and Tiffany had woven around me, unraveling their grip stitch by stitch. By 10 o'clock, I was at Greenleaf Spa. The lobby smelled of lavender and lemon water. Loretta was waiting, her silver hair gleaming, her eyes dancing. "You really did it," she whispered as we hugged. "You walked away." I nodded, and for the first time in years, the knot in my chest loosened. While we changed into soft robes and slipped our feet into warm slippers, my phone buzzed once, then again, then in a steady stream. Daniel, Tiffany, unknown numbers, maybe relatives, maybe friends, already gathering at their house. I set the phone face down on the locker bench. For 62 years, I had answered every call. Today, I would not. As the massage therapist worked the knots from my shoulders, I pictured the scene unfolding at Daniel's house. Guests arriving, coats draped over chairs. Children tugging at tablecloths asking for snacks. Tiffany opening the oven to find it empty, no turkey waiting, no pies cooling. Daniel pacing, pulling out his phone, dialing my number with growing urgency. I imagined the confusion turning to panic, the whispers spreading through the room. "Where's the food? Where's Margaret?" I almost laughed out loud as the therapist pressed into my spine. Let them scramble. Let them face the reality of hosting without the woman they had always treated like invisible scaffolding. At lunch, Loretta and I sat in the spa cafe, sipping cucumber water and nibbling salads. My phone, left on silent, vibrated nonstop against the table. Loretta raised an eyebrow. "You going to answer?" I shook my head. "No. They'll figure it out." By mid-afternoon, as I soaked in warm mineral water, I knew the chaos would be peaking. Kids crying, guests murmuring, Tiffany's perfect image cracking. Daniel red-faced, trying to explain why his mother had disappeared. And somewhere in that house, my note sitting square on the kitchen table like a verdict. The rebellion was silent, but it thundered through me. For years, I had given without question. Today, my absence spoke louder than any sacrifice ever had. As twilight fell, I wrapped myself in a soft robe and looked out the spa window at the fading sky. My phone had finally gone quiet. Maybe they had stopped calling. Maybe they were sitting in that cold, quiet house realizing that the glue they had taken for granted had slipped free. And for the first time in decades, I breathed easy. Back at Daniel and Tiffany's house, the Thanksgiving scene unraveled like a badly stitched quilt. Guests began arriving a little before noon, cars lining the street, voices carrying as coats were shrugged off and children tumbled inside. They expected warmth, the smell of roasted turkey tables groaning under pies and casseroles. Instead, they were greeted by an unsettling emptiness, no food in the oven, no decorations on the table, no grandmother bustling with trays. "Where's Mom?" Aunt Linda asked as she set down a pan of green beans. She glanced around at the kitchen, frowning at the bare counters. Did she step out for something? Daniel's laugh was brittle. "She's running late." He checked the oven again as if the bird might magically appear. Its cold metal racks reflected his panic. Tiffany plastered on a smile. "She probably has everything under control. You know Margaret." But her voice wavered. Behind her, the children had already begun clamoring for snacks, their shrill voices echoing off the bare walls. By 1 o'clock, the living room was chaos. Toddlers shrieked, older cousins wrestled, juice spilled across the carpet. Guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering to one another. I thought Margaret always handled the food. Wasn't she supposed to watch the kids? The weight of expectation hung heavy, and every eye turned toward Daniel and Tiffany. Tiffany snapped at her sister-in-law. "Can you keep them quiet?" The sister-in-law arched an eyebrow. "Why weren't you counting on Margaret for that?" The word sliced, and Tiffany flushed. Daniel paced the kitchen phone clutched in his hand. He had called me a dozen times already, each one unanswered. Finally, he spotted the folded paper under the salt shaker. His hands shook as he opened it. He read the note once, then again, his face blanching as if the words had struck him across the cheek. "What is it?" Tiffany demanded. He shoved the paper at her. She read silently, her eyes narrowing. "She can't be serious. Not today." But I was serious, dead serious. By 2 o'clock, tension thickened the air. Some guests quietly slipped away, muttering excuses about other dinners to attend. Others stayed uncomfortable but unwilling to abandon tradition. In the absence of order, children raided cabinets, tearing into bags of chips. The grand illusion Tiffany had curated for weeks, the perfect Instagram-ready Thanksgiving, crumbled into spilled soda and paper plates. Uncle Joe tried to lighten the mood, chuckling as he held up a cracker. "Well, at least we've got snacks." No one laughed. In the living room, Claire cornered Daniel. "What did you do? Mom would never just vanish." Daniel rubbed his temples. "Nothing, I didn't do anything." Claire raised an eyebrow. "She left a note, didn't she?" He avoided her eyes. She folded her arms, voice sharp. "You've leaned on her too long. Maybe this is the only way she could make you listen." The words stung because they were true. Daniel felt it every babysitting request, every catered meal, every unacknowledged sacrifice stacking up like debts he had never paid. Now the bill had come due and everyone could see it. By late afternoon, Tiffany snapped. She stormed into the kitchen, slammed her manicured hand against the counter, and shouted. She ruined Thanksgiving. Heads turned. Conversations stilled. The children fell silent for a moment, wide-eyed at the outburst. But then Aunt Linda spoke softly from the corner. "No, Tiffany. You ruined it. You and Daniel. You treated Margaret like a servant. She's your mother, not your staff." Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of truth. The room shifted. Guests nodded some murmuring agreement. The exposure was complete, not through any grand confrontation of mine, but through the undeniable evidence of absence. My silence, my refusal to play the role, had spoken louder than words. By evening, the house was nearly empty. Guests had left hungry children cranky. Tiffany furious. Daniel sat slumped at the table, staring at my note again. For the first time in years, he saw me not as a backdrop, but as a person, someone who could choose someone who had chosen not to be used. And though I wasn't there to witness it, I know the truth landed like a stone in still water rippling outward. My rebellion had exposed everything, the entitlement, the disrespect, the generational script that had kept me chained. That night, while Tiffany scrubbed grape juice from the carpet and Daniel reheated frozen pizza for the kids, I soaked in lavender water at the spa, a glass of wine in my hand. The chaos was theirs to manage now, and for once, I felt no guilt, only freedom. 2 days after Thanksgiving, my phone finally rang with a call I chose to answer. It was Daniel. His voice, once casual and commanding, was strained, fraying at the edges. "Mom, we need to talk, face to face." I agreed, not because I owed him anything, but because silence alone wouldn't teach the lesson. Boundaries need words. We met at my kitchen table, the same table where I had kneaded dough-iced cakes, written checks for his emergencies. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon from the pie I'd baked for myself, just for myself for once. I didn't offer him a slice. Daniel sat stiff eyes darting. Tiffany stood behind him, arms crossed, her expression brittle as glass. "You humiliated us," she started, voice sharp. "Do you know how many guests left early? How embarrassed we were." I let her words hang in the air, then folded my hands. "Embarrassment," I said slowly. "You want to talk about embarrassment? Try being 62 years old and realizing your son and his wife think of you as unpaid help." Daniel winced. Tiffany flushed but pressed on. "You could have said something instead of abandoning us." I leaned forward. I did say something. For years. With my body. With my exhaustion. Every time I cooked until midnight, every time I canceled a doctor's appointment to watch your kids, every time I spent my savings on your events. That was me saying something. You didn't hear it, so I stopped talking and started acting. Daniel's shoulders sagged. He rubbed his temples. "We didn't mean." "Yes, you did." I cut in, my voice firm. "You meant every word. She has nothing better to do." "That's what you said. Do you realize how cruel that is, to dismiss my life, my worth, as if I exist only to make yours easier?" Silence settled heavy. Tiffany shifted uncomfortably. "We just thought you liked helping." I shook my head. "There's a difference between helping and being used. You crossed it long ago." For the first time in years, Daniel didn't have a rebuttal. He looked smaller somehow, as though the weight of the truth pressed down on him. Finally, he whispered, "We didn't expect you to walk away like that." I met his eyes. "That's the problem. You never expected me to have a choice." The clock ticked loudly in the background. My words filled the room, and for once, no one rushed to cover them. Finally, I stood. "Here's what will happen now. I will not be your caterer. I will not be your babysitter. If you want me at holidays, invite me as family, not as staff. If you can't do that, don't invite me at all." Tiffany bristled. "So you're just cutting us off?" "I'm cutting off the abuse," I said calmly. "You can choose whether that means cutting me off too." Daniel swallowed hard. His eyes glistened, but he nodded. "I understand, Mom. I really do. I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology. It wasn't years of gratitude poured out. But it was a start. And for the first time, I believed he actually meant it. Tiffany didn't apologize. She muttered something about miscommunication and stormed toward the door. Fine. Some lessons take longer to sink in. After they left, I sat back at the table staring at the pie. My hands shook not with fear, but with release. The confrontation hadn't destroyed me, it had freed me. That night, Loretta called. "So how'd it go?" I told her everything. She chuckled softly. "You finally flipped the script, Margaret. You're not invisible anymore." I smiled. "No, I'm not. For decades, I thought confrontation would shatter my family. Instead, it exposed the cracks that were already there. It forced Daniel to see me, and it forced me to see myself as more than a cook, more than a nanny, more than a shadow." The fallout was messy but necessary, and though Thanksgiving had collapsed into chaos for me, it had been the first truly thankful day in years. In the weeks after Thanksgiving, word spread faster than wildfire. In a family like ours, whispers traveled from one kitchen to another, passed over coffee cups murmured during church potlucks. By the first Sunday of Advent, I couldn't walk into the sanctuary without noticing the sideways glances directed not at me, but at Daniel and Tiffany. It began innocently enough. After the service, a neighbor approached me. "Margaret, I heard about what happened." "Good for you," she said, pressing my hand. "About time someone set boundaries." The words startled me. I hadn't told her anything. She must have heard it from someone who had been at the disastrous dinner. By the next week, even acquaintances were offering their support. At the grocery store, a woman I barely knew from town leaned in and whispered, "You were brave. Too many of us keep swallowing our resentment. You didn't." Meanwhile, Daniel's phone calls grew shorter. He sounded weary, stripped of his easy confidence. "Mom, people keep asking about Thanksgiving," he admitted one night. "They look at me like I failed." I didn't soften my tone. "That's because you did fail. You failed to see me as a person. Now everyone else sees it too." At work, Tiffany faced her own fallout. A colleague of hers, whose mother also attended the Thanksgiving debacle, shared the story in the break room. Soon, Tiffany's image of effortless control was cracked wide open. She had built her reputation on meticulous party planning, Instagram-worthy hosting. Now people snickered, the hostess who couldn't even manage her own holiday without her mother-in-law. One evening, Loretta came over with a bottle of wine. I almost feel sorry for them, she said, pouring 2 glasses. Almost. But then I remember Tiffany sneering at you and the sympathy evaporates. We clinked glasses, laughter bubbling between us. But the consequences weren't only social. The financial strain hit too. Daniel confessed he had put money down on catering for a corporate event, assuming I would cover Thanksgiving like always. When it collapsed, his reputation with his colleagues faltered. They said if I can't even manage a holiday, how can I handle a project deadline? His voice cracked with shame. I didn't gloat. I simply said sometimes consequences are the only teachers. Even my grandchildren felt the ripple. Claire told me her daughter asked, "Why was everyone so mad at Grandma?" Claire had answered honestly because Grandma finally said no. The little girl had frowned, then smiled. Good. Saying no is important. Out of the mouths of children came the truth Tiffany had failed to grasp. By Christmas, the family dynamics had shifted entirely. Invitations to gatherings came phrased differently. We'd love you to join us, Margaret, but only if you feel like it. Some extended family members, inspired by my stance, began setting their own limits. One cousin refused to host unless others brought dishes. Another aunt said she was too old to babysit everyone's children at reunions. My rebellion had sparked a quiet revolution. Daniel came over one snowy evening, Tiffany notably absent. He sat at the table where the confrontation had happened weeks before. His face was tired, his hands fidgeting. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking. You're right. I took you for granted. I let Tiffany push and I didn't stop her. That's on me." The words were halting, but they were real. I could see it in his eyes. "I'm not asking you to come back and do everything again," he continued. "I'm asking for a chance to do better, to invite you as a guest to listen when you say no. Can you give me that chance?" I studied him, the boy I had raised, now a man humbled. "Yes," I said at last. "But know this, if you slip back into old habits, I will walk away again, and next time I won't leave a note." He nodded, accepting the weight of the condition. It was the first time I felt truly heard. As for Tiffany, she avoided me. Word around town was that she bristled whenever people brought up Thanksgiving, blaming me for the humiliation. But even her friends grew quiet when she tried to spin the story. They had seen the truth with their own eyes, a woman used too long, finally drawing a line. In January, the local community center invited me to speak at a women's circle. "We heard about your Thanksgiving," the organizer said, smiling. "We think other women could learn from your courage." I laughed at the irony, but agreed. That evening, I stood before a small group sharing my story. Heads nodded, eyes filled with tears. When I finished, one woman whispered, "You gave me permission to stop apologizing for saying no." That was when I knew the consequences of my choice had rippled further than my family. I hadn't just reclaimed my own dignity, I had shown others it could be done. The aftermath was not destruction, but revelation. Daniel had been forced to face his selfishness, Tiffany, her fragility, and I, my own strength. The community saw the truth respect was overdue, and through it all I carried no regret. Because sometimes the only way to change everything is to walk away. January snow blanketed Dayton, the world outside my window, hushed and clean like a slate wiped clear. It felt fitting. My own life had been scribbled over by others' demands for too long, and now I was writing it fresh in my own hand. The first boundary came quietly. When Daniel called to ask if I could watch the kids while Tiffany attended a bridal shower, I said a single word: no. Not angrily, not apologetically. Just firmly, calmly, like setting down a stone to mark a path. There was silence on the line, then a soft, "Okay, Mom. I'll figure it out." For the first time, he didn't argue. I started to fill my days with choices that belonged to me. Mornings at the library sipping coffee with Loretta as we browsed the new releases. Afternoons at the community center where I joined a watercolor class. Evenings spent journaling the pen, moving freely across pages where I recorded not just events, but feelings, something I'd long buried beneath duty. At first, the absence of constant obligation felt strange, like I had misplaced something. But soon, it felt like breath filling my lungs after years of shallow inhales. Daniel began visiting differently too. No longer arriving with lists of favors, he came with simple conversation. He brought the children not as burdens, but as companions. We baked cookies together, small batches on my schedule, and when flour dusted the counters, I laughed instead of sighing. They were guests in my home, not assignments on my to-do list. Tiffany remained distant. At a family birthday gathering in February, she greeted me with a thin smile, her words clipped. But even she had learned. The food was catered the childcare split among cousins the hosting shared. She no longer looked to me as the invisible scaffolding. Whether from pride or resentment, the result was the same, my freedom. Healing wasn't only about saying no, it was about saying yes to myself. I booked a weekend trip with Loretta to Chicago Museum's deep dish pizza a night at the theater. As the train hummed beneath us, I stared out the window, exhilarated by the realization that I could go anywhere, anytime without asking permission or calculating who might fall apart without me. The women's circle at the community center invited me back. This time, I spoke not just about boundaries, but about renewal. I told them how I had given pies to a shelter instead of to ungrateful mouths, how I had learned to treasure solitude as much as service. One woman squeezed my hand afterward, whispering, "You reminded me that I'm not just a grandmother. I'm still me." Her tears mirrored my own. In March, I began drafting a memoir. Not a bitter exposé, but a reflection, chapters about love twisted into duty, about invisibility, about the Thanksgiving rebellion that changed it all. Writing gave shape to my healing. Each page was a declaration that my story mattered not just as a cautionary tale, but as proof that reinvention was possible at any age. Claire visited often, her support unwavering. One afternoon, she hugged me tight and said, "Mom, you've taught me more in these last few months than in all my life. That it's okay to draw lines, that love without respect is just exploitation." Her words lit something inside me. Perhaps my rebellion wasn't just for me, it was a lesson passed forward. By spring, the thaw came. The snow melted, the earth softened, and I planted flowers in my small garden. Each bloom felt like a marker of resilience. Neighbors stopped by, admired the tulips, and lingered to chat. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was seen, valued, respected. Healing showed itself in small moments. The first time I declined an invitation I didn't want, guilt did not claw at me. The first time I spent money on a spa day instead of groceries for a family feast, I felt joy instead of shame. And the first time Daniel hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for still being here," I knew the bond between us was healing, not because I returned to servitude, but because he finally recognized me as more than service. Boundaries, I learned, are not walls. They are doors, doors that open only when respect is knocking. By summer, the memoir draft was complete. Loretta and I celebrated with iced tea on her porch, the evening cicadas humming around us. "What will you do with it?" she asked. "Maybe publish it," I said. "Maybe just keep it for myself. Either way, it's mine." I smiled, realizing that was the true resolution: ownership of my own life. No more being written into others' plans without consent. No more invisibility. Thanksgiving had once been a day of exhaustion and resentment. Now it was a marker in my story, the day I changed everything. The day I chose respect over convenience, dignity over duty, selfhood over silence. And as the sun set over Dayton, casting long, golden rays across my garden, I knew the truth. I was free. Not because my family finally respected me, but because I had demanded it, and in demanding it, I had healed. The following Thanksgiving arrived with a gentler air. No frantic phone calls, no lists of chores, no unspoken expectation that I would carry the weight of an entire family on my back. Daniel called a week before, his voice careful. "Mom, we'd love to see you. Just as a guest. We're having it catered this year." I smiled into the receiver, a warmth blooming that had nothing to do with obligation. "I'll bring a pie," I said. "Just one. For myself and for anyone who wanted a slice." At the gathering, the house looked different. Not because of decorations, but because of atmosphere. The children were occupied with games Daniel had arranged, the food laid out by professionals. Tiffany still wore her crisp smile, but she no longer barked orders. For once, I sat at the table, not rushing back and forth, not serving, but seated, seen. It wasn't perfect. Old habits lingered, but it was progress. Later that evening, Claire leaned across the table. "Mom, you changed the whole family. No one dares treat you like staff anymore." I chuckled. I didn't just change the family, Claire. I changed myself. That was the real victory. In the quiet month that followed, I polished my memoir and mailed it to a small publisher specializing in women's voices. To my surprise, they accepted it. The book Boundaries of Love found a modest readership. Letters trickled in from women across the country, grandmothers in Idaho, retirees in Florida, widows in Vermont. They all said the same thing. "Thank you. I thought I was the only one. You gave me courage to say no." Some stories were heartbreaking women who had been drained dry by family who mistook sacrifice for servitude. Others were hopeful women who had, like me, drawn lines and rediscovered joy. Each letter was a reminder that what happened at my Thanksgiving table was not just my battle. It was part of a larger struggle faced by countless women of my generation. At 62, I hadn't expected new beginnings, but boundaries had unlocked them. I took up watercolor seriously, my garden flourished, and I traveled with Loretta to places I'd only dreamed of. Life felt less like a burden to endure, and more like a canvas waiting for color. Looking back, the betrayal still stung. The memory of overhearing Daniel and Tiffany's voices, "She has nothing better to do," still made my chest tighten. But it no longer defined me. Instead, it was the moment that woke me up, the spark that lit the fire of change. The moral of my story is simple but hard-won. Love is not servitude. Respect is not optional. Boundaries are not selfish. They are essential. For those watching who are my age or older, let me say this. You have given enough. You have cooked the meals, watched the children, paid the bills, swallowed the insults. You do not need to keep proving your worth by sacrificing it. Your dignity is not a bargaining chip. Your love is not a service to be scheduled. And if you fear that saying no will cost you your family, remember this. If they only love you for what you do not, for who you are, that isn't love. That's exploitation wrapped in holiday wrapping paper. This is not a call to bitterness. I still love my son. I love my grandchildren. I even tolerate Tiffany, but I love myself too. And that love requires space, respect, and yes, the power to say no. So to everyone listening, especially those in your 50s, 60s, 70s, take inventory of your life. Ask yourself, are you living as a person or as a role? If it's the latter, maybe it's time to write a new script. Don't wait for permission. No one will hand it to you. You must claim it. Because when you do, you don't just change one holiday. You change your whole life. And you may find, as I did, that the world doesn't collapse when you walk away. It rearranges. It learns. It grows. And so do you. As I close my book and my story, I leave you with this: family can wound, but it can also heal. Sometimes healing begins the moment you choose yourself. I am Margaret Lewis. I was 62 when I decided to change everything. And I promise you, if I could, so can you.